Hello, everybody, and welcome to Live with Obsessed. I'm Annette Densham, and I am here with the most amazing Dr. Emma Osong. And, you're going to love this conversation. Emma is obsessed with living a conflict-inspired life, and she's a huge advocate for peace. And we're going to find out why. But first of all, I just want to give you a bit of an insight into her background. So Emma used to describe herself as an American Cameroonian, but today she introduces herself as an American of Southern Cameroonian origins, and she's one of America's most notable advocates and leading voices striving for permanent peace based on justice in the Ambazonia and Cameroun War. So it's still raging, and that's where you're from. Welcome, Emma. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Annette, for having me here. Looking forward to a really engaging conversation. And thank you for that introduction. Yes, as I say, if you asked me just a short while ago to introduce myself, like most people, we tend to tie it back to our place of origin, right? I would introduce myself as an American Cameroonian. But today, if you ask me that same question, Annette, I'm going to say I am an American of Southern Cameroon's origin, and therein lies the sum total of what is today my lived reality. And one of the things that really inspires me to talk about, because it's near and dear to my heart and that of so many other people.
So your home, the place where you were born, is Cameroon?
That's the country that I used to call Cameroon. I grew up on it, believing it was my country, and I woke up to a realization that for my entire life, I have been taught an entire bill of lies. I woke up to a new realization that the country I held a flag for, the country I sung an anthem and was taught as a young person throughout my life, was really not my country, that I have been told an entire life's worth of untruths about where my origins are, what that origin is, and who I am supposed to be within that construct called Cameroon, the country that I believe was my birthplace. So the new twist to my introduction is not only my story, but the story of 8 million people, many of whom around my age, if I could dare to tell my age on social media, are also realizing that they are awakening to a new truth about their place of birth. Yeah.
So what was the lie that you found out that made you question? Because that's pretty significant to, we place so much importance on our place of origin, and to find out that it was a lie must have been quite earth-shattering for you.
That's the story, Annette. It wasn't so much as someone waking you up and saying, the mother you knew all your life is not your mother. But this time, it was a raging war that was unfolding steps from my childhood home. And being 7,500 miles away, living where I am now in America, I am going, what is going on? The pictures of the casualties of war are spilling onto social media and into my phone, and you are faced with the reality from the moment of the inception of the war, declared by the president of the country of Cameroon on the people of one section of this country called Cameroon. And I'm looking at my entire hometown engulfed in war and the surrounding villages. You cannot run away from it, Annette. So you are awoken to say, why is war going on? Why is the military killing your own people, your family? Why are villages being burned? Why are school children not in school? The questions begin, right? And as you start asking the question, and the answers are, oh my God, the country called Cameroon was indeed two countries who achieved independence on two separate days and opted for what one would call a confederation, two states of equal status, right? So each one with the right to sovereignty, each one with its own internationally recognized borders, and over the course of your life, one of those countries ceases to exist, not through volition, but through assimilation and annexation. That history, Annette, was never taught to me as a young child. I was taught a different history of an indivisible country with me and my parents and my relatives living in a country where we were essentially annexed, assimilated, and as we woke up 4 years ago, faced with war, and we're asking the question, what is going on? So that's in a nutshell, my realization in the past 4 years.
That's pretty massive. That's earth-shaking.
Yeah,
Now, it's a heavy topic. So how do you reconcile that? Because, being, educated and immersed in this conflict, would make a lot of people bitter and angry. But you actually have a different approach to conflict and war and, the horrible things that happen in the world, is that you actually embrace a conflict-inspired life. Can you explain to me what that means?
Yes, that's a very exciting area of my life. And let me tell you how I got there, because that's another story, and I'll try to be brief. So imagine, just as the social media picture of young people being killed coming on social media, and I'm watching it, I don't know what to do, I'm confused. Imagine at the same time, I'm sitting by my 24-year-old daughter's bedside at one of the major hospitals in the United States. On that same day and time, literally to the day, she has just been diagnosed with debilitating illness and she's unable to walk. And I'm caught between caring for my 24-year-old, who now is essentially a 2-month-old, unable to turn herself from the neck down. I have cell phone in hand, and I'm watching the villages around my childhood home burn to the ground. I'm watching hundreds and thousands of people killed by the military for simply protesting the injustices that they have suffered at the hands of a 38-year-old dictator, president of the country called Cameroon, Mr. Biya, and I am literally confused. As a mother, I'm drawn to my 24-year-old to be there, to be strong for her. Of course, that took everything in me. On the other hand, there is this pull that there is danger for my family back at home. What do you do with that? So living conflict inspired for me was when you have sunk down and there is no way but up to go, you realize that it's about taking one responsibility for what's happening. So I have to be strong for my daughter. I have to combat all the different forces, from insurance to her care and everything. And I am pulled by everything in my fiber to figure out how to answer the call about a war 7,500 miles away. So living conflict inspired for me is a simple concept of getting radically clear about what's happening around you so you can become real. And what do I mean by that? Very simply, it's this concept of, okay, things are happening. I have to say what I want to say and do what I need to do. I have to accept the responsibility for caring for a family member, and for being engaged. Do I sit and become a couch warrior and simply feel saddened by the death and destruction? So that's the part of accepting responsibility, right? And getting inspired and looking for inspiration in the darkest of your moments in life, right? And how to engage. And these sounds like heading matters, but it's really looking, as I say, asking questions. Who really am I? Why is there a war? Steps from my childhood home. So that calls for some kind of personal engagement. It could be, Annette, the kind of engagement where you sit and become a couch warrior and just complain about things, whether it's in the case of taking care of a loved one or advocating, as I say, for peace that is not the kinds of peace that you have enjoyed. Remember, the country has not been in war. It is now in war 4 years since 2016. So obviously it wasn't at peace. So it is that concept of becoming real, which is really my go-to mnemonics, if I could call that, you know, the responsibility part, the engagement part. And then it's about becoming answerable to myself first, because I can't expect others to give me the answer. I have to start engaging and finding the answers for myself and knowing who really I am. So there's a part there, Annette, that has to do with self-education, self-acceptance, accepting the stuff around you, and knowing that you have the power, you have the agency, and you have the control, even in conflict and even in challenges. So those are some of the living conflict mantra that I go to, and I'm happy to share with anybody. The last part of that, of course, is finding a way to lead. So I said real, right? The L part of that real, Annette, is really leading as though you were leading your own organization, simply becoming the buck stops with me kind of deal. I'm the CEO of my own, you know what. So I've got to be accountable, responsible, and engaged. So when I was caught between what is the proverbial rock and a hard place, there are two choices. When you're so down in the bottom, there's only one way to get out of it, and it's up.
That's so true.
No other choice. So my living conflict and living inspired by the conflicts in my life is really looking at it head on, but with different lenses. And those lenses are that taking responsibility, being answerable, engaging to ask questions, to bring partners along the way, right? To enroll other people in what I'm trying to do, because you can't do it alone. Whether it's in illness, in caregiving, or in my case, in throwing myself into the conflict to figure out how I can bring peace, a permanent peace, in what today is a war that has seen more than 20 people killed, nearly 1 million displaced, Annette. It is estimated 4 million people are at risk, and there are 100,000 refugees in Nigeria. There are some estimates by international organizations that 8 out of every 10 school-age children are not in school because some of the schools are burnt, the security issues are high. Your audience will, if they are tuned into this crisis, will note that just this past October 24th, gunmen entered into a school in Kumba, one of the cities in my area, and gunned down mercilessly 8 school-aged children, some as young as 11, massacred. And this has been going on for 4 years. And my purpose now is to do everything I can to let everybody who can listen, including you and your audience, know that there is, as they say, SHIT happening in that place called Cameroon, and they need to join us in augmenting our voices to call for immediate cessation of hostilities, to call for the international community to bring the parties together to talk to find a permanent peace, because the government of Cameroon has declared war, and nobody ever wins a guerrilla war on it. Not on the people. You never do. Just ask Americans, they'll tell you.
Yeah, and it's interesting you're talking about this war. I've never heard of it. I've never even realised it was going on.
Yeah. I could go on forever. So part of the reason I wanted to come on this podcast is because the Asian countries, Australia, and those distant parts of the world are not picking up as much as I think they can on the war going on in Cameroon. And that's why it's important that everybody, no matter where you are, a common humanity is at stake. So the more you know about what some governments are doing in parts of the world, the better we can bring pressure to bring the elements to either stop the hostilities, to either dialogue for peace, or to just end wars. So my appeal to your audience today is, as much as I can talk about the more personal development aspects of a conversation, is to bring awareness to the audience that there is a 4-year genocidal war going on in the country called Cameroon, and there is no end in sight as we speak, and everything must be done for us to lobby every country we can to bring the necessary pressure to end the hostilities. So that's part of the reason why I think this podcast is important for me, is to share with the audience my own personal experience and to highlight for them what is going on so they can become engaged and find ways in which they can help bring peace to that part of the country. I'd like to add here that it used to be just a few short years ago, one would say wars are distant events, right? As long as they are not occurring in my backyard. So I can ignore them. After all, I'm not facing the barrel of the gun. But that's no longer the case. We know we live in a highly interconnected world. So a war that appears to be 7,000, sometimes 10,000 miles away from your backyard is consequential to you. We have seen just the past few years the mass of humanity drowning in the Mediterranean. Now, those were the results of wars and, as I call, failed states that for some people are in such distant lands, they would have a hard time finding the countries on the map. But sooner or later, the effects and consequence of those events elsewhere sort of have a way of turning up, not only in our environment, but in our backyards. So it's important that your audience, for me, it's important for your audience to know about the conflict through my story.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Women for a Permanent Peace and Justice? So this is an organisation that you've founded, because I hear it'd be so easy being so many miles away from something that isn't impacting your daily life to go, isn't that sad? Like so many of us do. Isn't that sad? I'll just go back to watching Netflix, or I'll go back to watching our day. But you've taken this very decisive action. So what's the group about, and what work do you do?
Yeah, I saw you turn out the mic there to minimize the noise. Yes, so I'm founder of an organization called Women for Permanent Peace and Justice. The name is really strategic. So it's a collection of women from southern Cameroon who that part of the country called Cameroon that have come together to say we need to band together to augment our voices so we can do everything we can to press for peace. But in the name, there is that word permanent, and it's very strategic, and the word justice. We do, today I saw flying over social media, one of Mandela's quotes that says something to the effect that the absence of war does not signify peace, and you do not achieve peace absent justice. The justice piece for my organization has to do with the element of looking at the root causes of why there is a war in a part of Africa that used to be lovingly called Africa in miniature. I'm sure most of your audience don't even know that this construct called Cameroun is touted as Africa in miniature. I could go on, but it's far from being a peaceful part of the world. So the permanent peace with Women for Permanent Peace and Justice is how to bring pressure through political mobilization, looking for friends in faraway places as Australia to join hands with us to call on the government of Cameroon not to bring what I call false peace to the people and cosmetic solutions, but to genuinely engage in dialogues, particularly with those who have now taken up arms to fight the government, because the government has prosecuted a war, and the young men in southern Cameroon have now taken up arms, are engaged in a deadly war that has seen the worst kinds of atrocities that no human is allowed to see in their lifetime. The beheadings, the chopping up of limbs, the throwing of babies in hot oil, the burning, the military. Your audience should look up the word Gabo, the village, Ngarubuh, the Gabo massacre, where the army burned two entire families to extinction. The Shea and Sika families do not exist anymore. They were burned down completely. It's just an example.
And this
is happening as we speak.
We're not talking historically. We're talking right now.
No, it is going on. And because, again,
how do we miss this stuff?
Because the heavy lobbying machinery of government and dictatorial governments like that of President Paul Biya of the construct called Cameroon would like to tell your audience there is nothing to look here and see. Look the other way. There's nothing to see here. I have my country, and a few terrorists and subversives who are trying to destabilize my country have taken up arms, and I'm going to do everything to crush them. So he calls 18 to 30-year-old young men who desperate. First of all, a country 65% is under 35 years, right? Unemployment is monumental as perhaps 30 to 40%. When you bring arms into their midst, what do you expect in return? They started off peacefully protesting just the bad services from government. The president of the republic took gunship helicopters and killed the protesters. So now what have they done? They have secured arms for themselves and now are defending against a full onslaught war. And what you have is retaliatory killings, mass executions, the burning of schools, 500 villages burned to the ground, more than 1 million people internally displaced, 4 million at risk. That's just some of the dire statistics. And the war is still going on as we speak. So to answer your question, Annette, the country's propaganda machine will tell the world, as they do when they sit, and they will sit in 2 days at the UN Security Council meeting that is coming up and tell the world that, oh no, we're just fighting some terrorists hell bent on destabilizing our country. No, no, these are people, 8 million of what used to be the former trust territories of the British back in the 60s at the turn of independence. We achieved independence on October 1st, 1961. The country called Cameroon, that most of your audience know, achieved its independence on the 1st of January 1960. And we were not part of that country. But that's the small fact that they didn't teach me. They would not tell you. And they would like you to believe that it's a one and indivisible country and they're killing so many civilians because they're trying to break away from their country. They won't tell you that it's two countries, one that has been assimilated through repression, subjugation, and deprivation. Ask me why I'm in the United States. I didn't have the means, the opportunity to pursue a further education if I came from the English-speaking part of the country called Cameroon. So, to some extent, I'm an education and economic exilee. And now I'm a permanent exilee because I speak up and I speak out, calling on the government of Cameroon and the restorationists, as they call themselves, fighters now, to sit down on a third-party mediated talks and address the root causes, because every other solution that has been prescribed unilaterally by the government has only resulted in escalation and more killings and more suffering. When I listen to the women who are the frontline stakeholder victims, whom I talk to occasionally, being away to engage with them through Women for Permanent Peace, their stories, if you're not strong internally, will completely break you up. These are women who no longer have their farmlands, their husbands have been killed, their village is burnt out, they have nowhere to go, they're displaced, they're living at the mercy of friends. It just goes on and on.
That's heartbreaking. I'm speechless that, I know we're talking about personal responsibility, and I'm sitting here thinking, this is not something mainstream media covers. It's not palatable, it's not comfortable, and it's a few times I've cried while you've been speaking because, I'm sitting here in my really, the most annoying thing going on for me is the annoying tree lopper outside. So how does someone like me, who lives a comfortable life, who has never had to ever confront anything of the horror that you're speaking about, how do I make a difference? How do the people who are listening make a difference to the world and to the people of Cameroon who don't deserve to live with this horror?
Very important question. First, just getting to know that there is a genocidal war going on in Cameroon is a first good step. Because the logical thing, as I mentioned, that a common humanity depends on each one of us safeguarding it, will mean that now you can call your government official. For us, it will be a Congress people. In America, the Assistant Secretary of State, Thibault Nage. He hears from us every day because these are important policy and international actors who also, through their multinationals, keep the structures in place that cause these deadly wars. So speaking to your leadership is an important first step to bring their attention that, hey, I heard on this podcast that in 500 village in some country has been burned. I recall when 500 villages were burned in Kosovo, Annette, the United States unilaterally bombed Serbia into submission and allowed 900 Muslim Kosovars to return to their homelands, because they saw that their common humanity depend on supporting the Kosovars from total destruction by the Serbian military. Here we are in Africa. The global north countries have so much economic interest in Cameroon. It's an oil-producing country. We have all kinds of natural resources: cocoa, coffee, tea, rare earth minerals, gold, bauxite, and of course, the multinationals are extracting and repatriating all of these resources and looking the other way, as the indigenous people have not even a few tarred roads, no access to healthcare, and are currently in war. So it is about bringing awareness to your leadership to say, what are you doing at the level of the United Nations Security Council? Why has an agenda not been put on the war in Cameroon and the restorationists, so that both parties can engage in dialogue? The country Switzerland has offered its good offices to mediate, but guess what, Annette? The government of Cameroon is telling its international partners, don't look here. There's nothing to see. We just have a few boys who are willing to disturb the peace of the citizens. We're going to take care of them. And how are they taking care of them? They've moved thousands of troops, and the mayhem in the wake of it. There's something called the Genocide Library, the Ambazonia Genocidal Library. I invite your audience to take a look at it, but please have a good, strong coffee, British version. And then be prepared to take good breaths and go through that. Because as I explain, I can't do it enough justice. That enough countries, enough citizens around the world are not paying attention and raising their voices. So Annette, your audience can lobby their leaders and ask a direct question. Why is President Biya of Cameroon not in Geneva for the talks? Not to go there and live as he does. This guy spends 8 months out of his country at taxpayers' expense, but will not come to the talks, and is telling the world that it is an internal problem. It is a problem of terrorism, and please just give me more military equipment and fund me so I can take care of terrorists. No, it is not an issue of terrorism. It's an issue of war declared on 8 million people who peacefully protested. At first, government services, lack thereof, and gunship helicopters were used to kill them, and the masses rose up in retaliation, and young people started taking up arms to defend themselves as the military moved in and erased villages after villages, killed young people, buried them in mass graves, thousands arrested and are languishing in jail, over 20,000 young people never once brought before a judge and charged. And just to make matters even more interesting for your audience, the leadership of the movement self-exiled to Nigeria to fight the government of Cameroon, and Cameroon, against international treaty, abducted them from Nigeria and took them and tried them in a military court in Cameroon and sentenced them to life in prison. Your audience need to join us, particularly the women who bear the brunt of this war, are in jail. As I speak, there's a child being born in the forest. As I speak, there is a young child dying because the mother cannot take the child to a healthcare facility because the only shanty healthcare has either been burned or the healthcare workers, out of security and safety, have run into the major cities. So that young child dies. As I speak, a mother is crying because she can't feed her children. These are the stories I hear when I speak to my counterparts on the ground who are the frontline victims. The stories you hear, those you see on social media are not fit for publishing, but we must tell it as it is, that there is a war, and it's been labeled by the Norwegian Refugee Council as a genocidal war, because people are killed not because of something they did, but because of who they are. And again, when people ask what is really the fundamentals here, it's about two countries, one that decides that another cannot articulate any demands, must be assimilated, annexed through all means necessary. And now it has culminated in a war that is still raging. As I say, steps from my childhood home and 8 million other people.
Dr. Emerson, you've given me so much to think about today, and I hope the people who watch this, and I've posted a few links of, I've not posted the Amazonian Genocide Library, but you can Google it. It is quite confronting to see, but this is what's going on in the world. And Emma, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today and waking me up so that I can take a little bit more responsibility for what's happening.
I'm so glad I had the opportunity, Annette. Everyone needs to hear the story. Again, it is happening thousands of miles away and seems so distant, but our common humanity rests on looking out for each other. And we have entered a time in our lives where we can't afford to let another Rwanda happen. And that's why, as I say, Women for Permanent Peace and Justice are doing everything we can to find partners along this journey who can help amplify our voices. So those with the big stick, as they say, they say you have the yam and you have the knife, and you can cut things and make things happen. Let them please, out of sheer justice, look into this and not let people in power take the lives of so many innocents. It has to stop, and it would only stop if we cease from being couch warriors, right? And step into some degree of activism, however little, to help.
Thank you for inspiring us. And for those who've joined us today, we will see you next time. Emma, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and bye-bye, Annette.